It's the French Revolution. How can we continue the French Revolution after Napoleon captured that revolution and made it into a political dream of him being the emperor of Europe and all of that. But the ideas of the French Revolution are still there: liberty, equality, democracy. There is something has been lost of the former generations' tranquility. We have been shocked, but now we cannot simply go on dreaming. We cannot have a philosophy that's simply dreaming. We have to tangle with these problems. We have to think about these things. Self-conscious mind is not merely passed beyond that to the opposite extreme of insubstantial reflection of self into self, which is that intuitive thinking. That's insubstantial, doesn't have a real content, doesn't have any connection with reality. In myself, like were many novels written in that era that were very, very, let's say, deep into self-reflection. What am I thinking every day? What am I experiencing? And there was this civil life with all these inconsequential, unimportant experiences, and people wrote about that. And this inner monologue that was going on, it was very important to many people in literature. We have this insubstantial reflection of self into self. But even beyond that, it has not merely lost its essential concrete life, it's also conscious of this loss and of the transitory finitude characteristics of its content. So he's describing a crisis. His idea of the necessity of a new kind of philosophy is based on a perceived need of his culture. There's something going on. People want to have a new foundation on which to base their reflections on reality. Let's say we know we have the urge to be free. We know that the old political system doesn't work. But how do we translate that urge into a real position containing truth? I mean, you can have a battle between opinions, you can have battle between preferences, but can we actually find out what is the best way of government? What is the true liberty of a civilian? Can we discover how to actually turn the ideals of this violent era, the French Revolution, how we can turn those into practice and establish peace and union and brotherly love? How can we do that? That was his aim at as a young man, together with Hölderlin and Fichte and his friends. Turning away from the husks it has to feed on and confessing that it lies in wickedness and sin, it reviles itself for so doing and now desires from philosophy, not so much to bring it to a knowledge of what it is, as to obtain once again, through philosophy, the restoration of that sense of solidity and substantiality of existence it has lost. So he says, this need for truth now expresses itself in a desire for solidity and the restoration of that sense of solidity. So philosophy isn't required to really bring about this solidity. It is not so much to bring chaotic conscious life back to the orderly ways of thought and the simplicity of the notion, as to run together what thought has divided asunder. How does it run here? Suppress the notion with a distinction restored. Yeah, this is the important word here. Philosophy is seen as something that should console people, that would act like a sleeping drug, to restore the feeling of existence. We want to feel secure. That's why we run to those intuitions. We run to those philosophies that talk about feeling. The need is very real. We have lost something of our peacefulness and tranquility and solidity. Everyone feels that. But the answer people are seeking is not to go to the drawing table, to really start thinking rationally, but it's to go beyond rationality and to move into the area of feeling. We want to feel good instead of understanding what is good. We want to have a sense of harmony even in a society that doesn't produce harmony because it's disharmonious. We want to feel good without understanding the good, without realizing the good. That is why what it wants from philosophy is not so much insight. Insight is painful. It wants edification. That is a religious word. Edification means you're built up in your faith. You are gaining a higher sense of certainty in your faith. You become more consistent in your actions. Edification is what religions try to do by building up the faith of their followers. And this is what is expected now from philosophy, you said. So philosophy is supposed to bring us the beautiful and the holy and the eternal, to bring us closer to religion, to make us experience universal love. These are the bait required to awaken the desire to bite. And so we are lured like fish to the line of the fisherman. Not the notion, but ecstasy. Philosophy becomes an exercise in ecstasy, in to have this mythical experience of the meaning of life or something. Not the march of cold necessity in the subject matter. And that is what his philosophy must do, to rationally develop the necessity in thinking instead of going to this enthusiasm. That's the opposition. Rational philosophy against the enthusiasm of a mystical and poetical kind of philosophy. That's his battle. That is his battle. He wants to get away from the demand from the era. In the same manner, I would say, by studying Hegel, we are in a battle with this naturalistic, materialistic ideology that is all around us, that prevents us from looking at the conceptual, prevents us from looking at the truth where it is to be found, in something like the spirit, something like our universal intellect. Okay, now he again makes the same kind of argument here with a little bit of variation, and here again, and here again, and here again, and here again, and here again. So I would suggest to you that you need to go to chapter 4, paragraph 4 for the next time, and going to try to read that. That's page, page 6 of this version. I think you have the same. And then we have to talk about formalism, which is somehow the opposite of that intuitionism that he first talked about. So what have we found so far? We have found first the literary idea. You cannot write a preface in the way other people have done. You really have to introduce philosophy in a philosophical manner. That might mean that we're somehow superficial here. We're not doing philosophy, but it might be useful to have some kind of outline of where he's going. And then secondly, philosophy doesn't arise in a vacuum. It arises in a very specific historical circumstance. On the one hand, this type of philosophy is demanded by the need of the time. And on the other hand, it goes against the fashion, because everything that is fashionable in the time, which is this intuitionist, metaphysical, poetical type of philosophy that seeks to console people, to give them a good feeling instead of giving them a good understanding. That's my summary of the first 3 paragraphs then. And then we're still a long way away from understanding what it means to have a systematic exposition in the form of the concept. I mean, that was the title, and it was the content of the demand that he was expressing, but what does it mean? And no step further to that. Again, we have the next time the negative step. We don't want to study the concept in the way a formalist would do that. And what formalism is, we will discover then next time.
Okay.
Okay, so we have some room to discuss all of this. We still have some time left. We might read on a little bit, but we can also look back and see what we have found and see if that is perfectly clear or that we have some problems with that.
Mm-hmm. There was a part he used the word husk. Is it like biblical word? Is there any?
Oh, no. That's like if you have a caterpillar, then it has a husk. It sheds its husk and becomes a butterfly. So it's, let's say, the external casing of something that you get rid of. So it's a biological metaphor.
Got it. And so sometimes in the passage, some different parts, he uses substance and I think essence are these words, he's using them in the same meaning that the classic like Greek used it, or it's different here?
Unfortunately not.
Yeah.
I wish you would have. Especially the word substance is used by him in a very technical and precise manner, different from Aristotle's idea. Substance in Hegel means something like the immediate shape of things without considering the role of the intellect. So if something is substantial or if something is taken in the form of substance, we look at the reality without considering the way we understand it. So we consider it without the concept. He can use the word substance, for instance, for Greek antiquity, because he's supposing that people in the Greek city-states were somehow completely absorbed in their everyday life, and he calls that substantial. Because there is Greeks didn't think about reality in the way we did. They simply accepted reality as it was, and they accepted themselves as part of that reality, and simply lived according to the dictates of the environment. So it's like, I mean, if you compare it to growing up, if you're a child, you simply accept the world around you, maybe with amazement and wonder, but you're not going to think much about why do I experience the world like this? That's more an adult question, because then you realize that there are alternatives to your way of experiencing things. As a child, you're supposing that everyone looks at the world the same way you do, and you don't think about it. I mean, a tree is a tree, and a flower is a flower. Why think about that? As an adult, you might think, well, it looks like a flower, but it might be plastic, or the tree might be cardboard. I might make a mistake here and there. this idea of complete acceptance of reality and your way of life, that is connected to the word substance, according to Hegel. There is a consciousness that is substantial, a way of being aware of things without considering your own consciousness, without being aware of the fact that you are the one looking at the world like that. You simply accept the world as it is. And the opposite of substantial or substance is subject or subjective, which doesn't mean merely pertaining to my perception, but it means understanding how my thoughts, my mind, my intellect is involved in my knowledge. It plays a part, it plays a specific role. I bring the categories and the concepts or the notions with me when I look at reality. And I mean, the whole phenomenology can be expressed like this. Substance has to become subject. So this immediate way of life and way of thinking without considering your own contribution to knowledge must give way to the complete self-awareness of your contribution to your knowledge. Let's say being has to become spirit. Substance has to become subject. I need to become aware of everything that goes on in my mind, because there's so much going on in my mind, so much going on in my intellect. The full realization of my intellect is to become fully self-aware, to understand myself completely, conceptually. Completely, there's nothing left out. Conceptually, I can express it in the form of, well, ultimately a philosophical system. So substance is immediacy, being absorbed in reality without reference to myself. And of course, subjective, then the opposite is to be fully self-aware and to be aware of my contribution to knowledge. But that's not the way Aristotle used the word at all. For him, substance was a characteristic of things. I mean, the substance of something was what was there underlying all the visible properties. I mean, I look at the table, I can leave out the idea of wood and color and size and position in space, and what is left is substance. Something that takes up space, which has all these characteristics of being of wood, made of wood, and having this color, etc. That's substance. The underlying, the literal word for substance in Greek is the underlying. But he uses that in his own particular manner. So that's important. Very important word here also is the word expression. We will talk about that later also. The truth of anything is only there when it is also expressed. There's no such thing as an implicit truth or an intuition of truth. If you know something, you will be able to say it. You have people who say, well, I know what it is, but I can't really explain it. Well, then you don't know it. If you can't explain it, you don't know it. So there's a lot of pretense that people know something because they are dimly aware of it. They have some kind of suspicion. But that's not knowledge. Knowledge is always conceptual, logical, propositional. You can express it. And let's say the level of the expression, the adequacy of the expression, is a measure for its truth. You can know things well, or you can hardly know anything about something, and that will show itself in the degree of your expression of it. So expression is very important. If you can't say it, you don't know it. That's what actually means. Um, um, well, at the start I gave you some kind of definition of the word concept. What else is there here?
There's another word for me. It's a little. I think it's a key word in his philosophy. Probably is immediacy.
Yes, immediacy. Yeah, that's the shape in which something is present to you as if it has no presuppositions. Immediacy is the negation of mediacy, of being mediated. If something is there and there is no context, seems to be no context. If I look outside and I see a tree, for instance, the immediacy of that is I see a tree. But that's not the whole truth of it, because to see a tree involves awareness of things in the world, awareness of living things. To use the notion of tree implies a universality. There are many trees. There is one kind of idea of tree that is realized in many ways. There can be oaks, and there can be larixes, and what kind of trees do you have? So immediately I see a tree. Okay, there is a tree. I can say that. And if that's all there is, that's immediacy. But all immediacy is actually a negation of the mediatedness of something. When I look at a tree, I'm ignoring the fact that I know about trees because of the history of my development as a child, learning to know what is like a tree, learning to know when adults call something a tree. All of that history I ignore. I'm not going to think about that again. So immediately I see a tree, but there is mediation underneath that. So everything that we understand without having to think about it presupposes a history in which we were enabled to understand something. Language, perception, understanding specific shapes, all of that comes into play whenever I see something as simple as a tree. So immediacy, for instance, is involved when I say, as an answer to the question, what is the totality of reality? What does it mean, everything? When I say, well, it is whatever it is. It is whatever it is. That's the answer of immediacy. I'm leaving out the whole process in which I can think about totality of reality, name it, combine all these various experiences, figure out that there might be one totality that can have a name, that has a characteristic. I'm leaving all of that out. I'm simply saying, well, the least that you can say, without any presupposition, is that it is. It seems to be without presupposition. It has the form of immediacy. It's a nice answer. What is the world? Well, whatever it is. It's a perfect answer, right? You cannot be wrong. But you can be wrong. Because giving that answer leaves out all the presuppositions that go into that word being. Being on its surface is the most immediate word. It doesn't have any content apart from, well, let's say presence. However, according to Hegel, the whole system of philosophy is the preproposition of that word. It seems to be the first thing you might say, but according to Hegel, it's the last thing you say. Immediacy seems to be the first of everything. No, says Hegel, it's the result of the mediation which then is forgotten or ignored. But to call something being is actually in some sense, the tip of the iceberg, because it has so many presuppositions. Simply to say that reality is what it is. Okay, but what is actually contained in that word is, That's an infinite number of categories and ideas. But the world as it is, it has number, it has quality, it has movement, it has history, it has time, it has space, it has matter, it has intelligence, and on and on and on. And I simply say, well, it is. I'm not saying what I really mean then. I'm saying it in an immediate fashion, meaning all the mediation that goes before that expression, this seemingly simple expression, I'm simply excluding that. I'm not talking about that. And then I have the audacity to say, simple, right? It's whatever it is. That's the perfect answer. No, it's a very imperfect answer because it leaves out all its presuppositions. So that's how immediacy then will work within Hegel's system. Every new category that appears has some semblance of immediacy. Well, it's simply this. And then it turns out it's never simply anything. Well, if it's not simply being, it's simply nothing. No, it can't be that. So it's simply becoming. No, it can't be that. So it's simply, and on and on and on and on. Until we reach the era of the spirit. The way we were talking about spirit is taking spirit in its immediacy, trying to figure out the meaning of the word immediately. But then, of course, we are leaving out the whole of the system, which is the presupposition of that word. So it doesn't matter how we begin. If we begin with whatever word we can choose, life, spirit, totality, reality, we can begin with whatever word we like. In as much as we then take it in its immediacy, it means the same as being. Being is just another word for that immediacy. You can start with spirit. Why not have a phenomenology of spirit that starts with spirit? And then Hegel will say, well, look at the position it has in the system. It's the first word. It's therefore the most immediate. Therefore, it's a wrong word. We're not being clever in our language, in our choice of words. Because whatever we begin with is immediacy itself. Now we have to start with that. We have to start with the end result. And the end result is the immediacy. And you and I don't have to think about what is. But as soon as we start thinking about what is, then everything that our culture has acquired in its knowledge comes into play. Our knowledge of the world is so complicated, so intricate, so complex. Not because we make it so, not because we are such geniuses, but because our language and our culture give us this enormous level of complex understanding of the world. Every word we use, we use like a genius. It's not our genius. It's a genius of our culture and of the history. Look, if you were in a cave, living as a caveman 40,000 years ago, you would look at the sun and cry something and have no idea. You might not even be aware of the regularity of the sun coming up and down. You might not even have words for the seasons in the year. You would rise to the level of the culture that you're in all of your knowledge. There would be things that you simply couldn't perceive. You couldn't see it. Because you had no words for it, you couldn't see it. You couldn't distinguish it from something else. It's enormous, this difference between, let's say, primitive humanity and our level of humanity. How you understand your own environment, using the computer and everything else. I mean, it's not genius in the sense that you have a technical awareness and that you're able to express all of that. It's substantial. It's not subjective. It's substantial. Everyone who drives a car is a genius in comparison to the caveman. But on the basis of what a whole culture has produced, and but that's, let's say, that ability to deal with our environment is so complex, so intricate that you wouldn't be able to figure that out all by yourself. You need culture to give you that. So we're standing on the shoulders of other people, and that's why we can look so far. And that's true for philosophy, but it's also true for our natural knowledge, our everyday knowledge. And you have all of that immediately, and you have it substantially, and now make that into something subjective. To become aware of it, express it, to express the presuppositions of it, that is philosophy. That is this labor of becoming truly self-conscious about everything that you already are. You're not achieving something new, but you're going to discover what it actually is that you are. As a citizen also, in objective spirit, as it's called, subjectively, what your body is like, what the functions of your perception are like, beyond biology and psychology. All of that you can discover in philosophy. Become self-aware of that. Because all of that is the presupposition of what you now are, every instance of your life. And that's the true marvel of this adventure with Hegel. This realization that how complex our individual lives actually are, and how much meaning and cultural history is actually involved in that.